Our presenters for today are Tom Nipper, Director 3 with Modesto City Schools Health Services Department, and Officer Martin Lemos with Modesto Police Department. Welcome and thank you for presenting to our families today. So Mr. Nipper and Mr. Lemos, we're going to ask that when you present, you can just unmute yourself and let me know when you'd like me to switch the slides. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, and you can advance to the next slide. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight for our forum on opioids and to discuss what's happening in our community, as well as at our schools and the Modesto City Schools effort to address these issues. My name is Tom Nipper, as was introduced, and I am the Director of Health Services for the school district. And I'll introduce Officer Martin Lemos from the Modesto Police Department. Good evening, Martin.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Can you hear me okay, Tom?
Yeah, I hear you just fine, so I presume everyone else can. Officer Lemos is going to start us off with the next slide and sharing some information with regard to the opioid pandemic in the city of Modesto and our community.
So I'll tell you all a little bit about myself. I've been a police officer in the city of Modesto for 18 years now. Yes, I'm very old, and I've done a little bit of work with the drug unit at the police department as well as the gang unit. I've been assigned to the southwest area of Modesto that has seen a lot of issues with substance abuse and drug cases and things like that. So I have experience with that kind of thing and those types of investigations. So we get started with a common question: what is an opioid? It's a drug that comes from the opium poppy plant. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how that's produced, and it's a long process for the people who grow the poppy, we have seen an increased amount of heroin, which is a derivative of the opioid plant, that's coming from Mexico. It used to be primarily from the Middle East, but now we've seen an increment of production in Mexico. What are the different drugs that opioids are from, or drugs that come from opioids? And a lot of it is prescription medications for pain management, and also drugs like heroin, like I mentioned before. Some of the painkillers that are available through prescriptions are oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, methadone, fentanyl, and codeine. Sometimes when you have a medical problem at a dentist's office, it's very common to get this type of prescription for pain management. If these medications are taken by a doctor and under the supervision of a doctor and they're prescribed, they're very safe and they can reduce pain effectively. The problem is that if, like anything else that is abused, it can become a dependency and an addiction for people who are abusing these types of drugs or prescriptions. Next slide.
Go ahead, the next slide, Patty. Thank you. Oh, go back one. Sorry, Patty.
Okay, so 2 in 5 overdoses are fatal. These are pictures of community members who have unfortunately passed because of the use of fentanyl and opioids, like the ones that we mentioned before. And so it's pretty sad. One case in particular that resonated with me was an individual who I met who was 18 years old on a call where he was suspected of selling pills to people. I was able to arrest him for this case. He bailed out, and then the very following date, I was dispatched to his overdose, and where unfortunately he had passed away. And so it was a sad situation, because I thought that by arresting him, it would help and hopefully prolong his life and kind of make him think about what the decisions that he was making. But it was very sad to see that the following day, after he bailed out, he passed away from using one of the pills that he was abusing, obviously. So it's a very real issue. It's very real. It's in our community, and that's why we're talking about this. Obviously, we're presenting to everybody to be well informed, but this just puts a visual to the faces that unfortunately the victims of overdosing has taken. And the campaign, if you look at the bottom left corner, the campaign is "One pill can kill you," and absolutely, we'll see in other slides, very minimal amounts of fentanyl can be deadly and lethal. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a visual diagram of how the problem has increased through the years. Thankfully, this year it has gone down substantially from when you compare it to 2021. But this information comes from the coroner's office here in Stanislaus County. And as you can see, in 2021, there was 123 deaths, related to opioid abuse. So obviously, when you look at 2022, we're below that number. I'd like to think, and I know that it's because of all the efforts from different government agencies in education and prevention and informing the public of the real threat that fentanyl causes, and opioids for that matter. Excuse me, in Stanislaus County, you can see that in 21 there was 176 deaths, and out of those 176, 123 were directly related to opioids. Next slide.
So we want to talk a little bit about how opioids work in your body, and this is a real medically inclined slide. This talks about how opioids affect the central nervous system, causing depression. And depression is not necessarily a mental state, but a slower state. So it does cause your body systems to slow down, which includes your thought processes. But in addition to thought processes slowing down, it also slows breathing and heart rates. The other thing is that opioids mimic what's called endorphins, and endorphins are the natural painkillers that are in your body, but also their energy. And endorphins also increase your dopamine, your dopamine release within your body. And the dopamine is the happy side. So the opioids have an effect on your body that they slow you down, but they make you feel a little bit better. Next slide, please. So this is what the average person might see as an effect of opioids. As I said already, they slow down the way you think, your reaction time, your memories, but also they can cause confusion, the slow heart rate, and trouble breathing, as was already mentioned. But your body can have some other symptoms as well. One of the greatest and most dangerous effects of the opioids is the slowing of the respiratory system, or the breathing. This is what causes people to die suddenly. Your body can also suffer from withdrawals from the opioids. So some of the withdrawal symptoms are mentioned here, but specifically vomiting and sweating are two of the hallmark signs of an opioid overdose. So mixing the opioids with alcohol or other drugs can intensify the effect of the opioid on the body, and therefore cause side effects to occur faster. In that case, there may not necessarily be time for a person to respond, and may succumb to the effects of opioids within the body. Next slide, please. So this is an example of how much fentanyl could be deadly to a person. So fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, meaning that it's manufactured, and most of the fentanyl in our community is not pharmaceutical grade, but is manufactured in illegal labs. So it's not uncommon, as Officer Lima said, for fentanyl to be prescribed following a medical procedure. But I think it's important for us to know that fentanyl, although it's often related to heroin as being 50 times more potent, it is almost 200 times more potent than OxyContin or oxycodone, which is a common drug found prescribed after procedures that could be found in your own medicine cabinet. So the drug that has 200 times more potency than OxyContin, it's important to see just exactly how much fentanyl could cause harm to a person. So the image on the left-hand side is a vial that shows what the equivalence is of heroin compared to the equivalence of fentanyl or carbamazepine, which is even more potent. But looking at the fentanyl, you can see the pencil and you can see the penny. Just that small amount of fentanyl can be a fatal dose to a person. Officer Lemus, next slide, please.
So just a little bit on the previous slide, you can see the minuscule amounts of the drug that can cause problems and be deadly. Here at the police department, we've changed the way we process recovered suspected illegal substances, because even that small amount, we've had instances where officers are packaging items for evidentiary purposes, and just the flake of some of this substance that you probably can't even see, if that excuse me, we've had officers exposed to it that actually start to lose consciousness, and so we carry kits, Narcan kits for ourselves, so that we can treat ourselves and hopefully not succumb to ingestion of some of this stuff. So we see it as a police department, and we've had to change a lot of the ways of how we handle suspected substances like this. Next slide, please. So I think everybody with Halloween just went by, and we saw a lot of reports on the news regarding rainbow fentanyl, and it's a very, very real thing in our community. I myself have confiscated, I think the biggest seizure that I did was 50,000 pills of fentanyl, suspected fentanyl rainbow pills. And as you can look at the bottom of the screen on the left-hand side, I mean, it's easy to see this and think that maybe it's candy or some type of breath mint. And so that's what makes it dangerous for our communities, because with colorful pills like this, it attracts the younger age children that, God forbid, if they get their hands into this, or a student, who erroneously takes this to school thinking that, maybe they found it on the side of the street thinking that it's a piece of candy or a bag full of candy, then you can see the potential risk for this. Also, it makes it, the reason why the cartels and the drug organizations make it this way is because number one, they want to hide it from the parents, and then number two, the police. And so they disguise it in different colors because when they're in the process of bringing it illegally through the border or ports of entry, this is exactly why they do it, because it's harder to detect. And if you just glance at it, you'd think you're looking at a piece of candy. So they come in a variety of bright colors, shapes, and sizes, and the reasons we've already explained. The DEA administration has warned other law enforcement agencies and about the dangers of having it in this form and in these bright colors. And also, it's not just fentanyl. It could be Xanax, Adderall, and things like that, other prescribed medications that are not made in a laboratory. They're made in a clandestine lab in somebody's backyard, and so obviously it's very dangerous. Next slide. So again, if you look at this slide, and if anybody that has seen it can tell the difference between real oxycodone or fake oxycodone, you really can't. Same thing with the Xanax. These drug organizations, specifically from Southern America, they make these pills this way, again, because it's harder to detect, and they feel that if they make a pill that resembles or looks exactly like the official pill, it'll be harder for them to be detected. And again, if you look at the photographs here with real Adderall in the green and then fake Adderall at the bottom, it's the same exact pill. It's the same. It resembles the same color, the same markings, and that's why sometimes it's difficult to detect on our end. People may say, I have a prescription for this, and it's not like the movies where we're gonna lick the pill or smell it or bring it close to our nose to figure out if it really is or not. Next slide.
So there's a difference between dependency and addiction to medications. And dependency is that you rely on this, but an addiction is you can't live without this. And opioids are a very highly addictive drug. So as you can read here, it does take more than 5 days. If you're taking it for 5 days, then you can develop an addiction. And that has to go back to the endorphins and the dopamine release in the brain and how the drug makes you feel and how your body responds to it. Dependency is just that you feel some symptoms when you stop taking the drug, but the addiction means that you continue to seek out the drug because you crave so badly those responses within your body. And when your brain does become dependent for this, then you start searching daily for this. That's one of the things that leads to the illegal acquisition of the fentanyl or other drugs, is the addiction portion of it, because they seek more and they seek more and they seek more. Next slide, please. So why do people take drugs? On the left-hand side, it tells you they try to fit in. Their friends are doing it. They want to do it. They've seen it done on TV. It makes sense. Somebody got away with it, and it was somebody that I knew, so I'm going to try that as well. A lot of the time, it's to escape or to appear grown up, because now they're being challenged by their friends to try a drug. And unfortunately, as we just learned, it is that opportunity to try the drug that leads to the next desire. One of the things that most recently happened was with using fentanyl, the rainbow fentanyl. The drug dealers would offer the red fentanyl and then say, oh, if you like that, try the blue fentanyl. And studies show that the red and the blue were the same, but it did increase their marketing opportunity by having different colors. Oftentimes, though, these types of drugs are prescribed to help to reduce anxiety, fear, and depression. So it's important to understand what a controlled substance is, and that you control the amount of the drug that you take. The fentanyl that is being used in our community is not prescription, and most often fentanyl is not a prescribed drug outside of the healthcare setting. So there are other medications that can help to soothe those issues in a person without going the illegal or illicit route that fentanyl uses. The next slide, please. So what are some signs of an overdose or a poisoning? It's important to understand the difference between the overdose and the poisoning. Oftentimes, when persons pass because of a drug ingestion, it is considered an overdose. There was the intention to use a particular drug, they used the drug, they used too much of the drug, and then they overdosed. What's often happening in our community, and I think Officer Lemus is well aware of this as well, is that other drugs are being laced with fentanyl. So if the intention was to use Xanax, I may have purchased Xanax, but the Xanax in our community is often laced with some fentanyl. That was a unknowing ingestion of fentanyl, and the passing after that is considered a poisoning death because it wasn't the intended drug. But there are some signs that you can tell if someone is overdosing or has overdosed or has been poisoned, because the symptomology will be the same. So they can have smaller constricted pupils. This is a response in the body to the drug itself. We already talked about the fact that they may be falling asleep or losing consciousness and may be limp and having slow speeches. But when their skin turns cold and clammy, or if they're starting to change color to a slightly blue color and their breathing is slow enough, that is an ominous sign of an overdose and a potential death. Your body only turns those colors when it's not getting enough oxygen. So what would you do if somebody was overdosing? There's 5 steps on the bottom of this slide to indicate that the first thing is to call 911. That's the most important step you could take to save someone's life. The other thing is to administer naloxone, also known as Narcan. This slide presentation was also supported by the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition. And in our community, they are teaming up with many other agencies to provide naloxone to our community and Narcan testing, or pardon me, fentanyl testing strips to find out if a drug does have fentanyl in it. Narcan is available through the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition. Try to keep the person awake and breathing, and especially sitting up. It's much easier for them to sit up and to breathe than to lay down. But if they are having to lay down, turn them on their side so that they don't choke in the event that they might be vomiting. And most importantly, if you can give the Narcan, stay with them. They may get a little violent after this because of the response of the medication in the body, but you can't overdose on Narcan, and Narcan does only work on opiates. Please stay with them. Just because they may start breathing again does not mean that they wouldn't stop breathing once the Narcan wears off. So it's an important step is to stay with them until 911 shows up. There's a lot of laws that protect you in the use of Narcan or naloxone. I think that's a real important step, though. If you know someone who's using fentanyl, you may not necessarily change their habit, but you could have a medication that might save their life. Next slide, please.
So I used to tell parents to be like a probation officer or a parole officer when they want to find things that their children may have, or specifically their teenagers that they're wondering about. Because I did a lot of work with the gang side of things, I would tell them, you know, you can go through your children's things, go through their pants, their backpacks, their cupboards. So the social media platforms have been a game changer for us, and I still stick to the same concept because as parents, we should be monitoring everything that they're doing on the internet, on their phones, on their tablets, in their rooms, what they're storing, what they're hiding, or you know, putting away in areas where they don't want their parents to look through. Um, so these are just some of the common emojis that you can find either on text messages. Most of the children nowadays or teenagers are using Snapchat or WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook. It's funny because my daughter tells me Facebook is for old people, which I agree because I kind of, you know, don't know how to work it that well. But um, but you know, there's other applications that they can have on their phones or their tablets or their computers, and so this is just kind of gives you a visual reference of what to look for and how to decipher some of the, you know, encoded messages, if you will. But it doesn't take too much of a rocket scientist. You know, if you look at the emoji of an actual pill, if you see that as a constant theme in some of the messages, then you probably, that little red flag in the back of your brain should say, okay, something's going on. What's going on here? And question them. The other thing that I encourage you to do, the same with the gang involvement. If you don't have any clue what you're looking at, but you know something's wrong and that red flag is up there, go to your school, your local schools, because a lot of the student supervision people that are out there, they know this stuff better than the police because they see it every day, they know about it, they hear about it, and so that's a really good tool for you to go to. Excuse me. But again, you know, I know it's a game changer with the platforms, social media platforms, but it is our job as parents to get it into their tablets and phones and monitor what they're doing and what they're saying and who they're texting and why they're texting them so often. Next slide.
So in Stanislaus County, there's a lot of resources, and one of them is the Center for Human Services. That's the poster on the left-hand side. They have a lot of counseling services that are available. They're local in our community, and they're more than happy to help out. They're located on Briggsmore, and if you're familiar with Briggsmore, I think they're located where the old Roller King is, but that's old for some old people. It's really close to the intersection of Prescott and Briggsmore. They also have a agency in Oakdale as well, but they offer services. In addition to their services at Center for Human Services, they also provide services on the Modesto City Schools campuses, which I'll review in a few minutes. The blue one is the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition website. That can be found by going to the stanrx.net. Their website has a lot of useful information, including how to prevent overdoses, how to get help, how to get rid of medications if you have extra medications at home, and more information with regard to the signs of an overdose and how to help someone who has an addiction. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, previous slide, thank you. On their other, also on their webpage is the Stanislaus County Opioid Awareness Summit that's coming up, and I'll have more information about that. Thank you. Next slide. So the Modesto City Schools has naloxone or Narcan on all of our campuses, grades K through 12. We've done this as a community service because we realize that this is present in our community, but we cannot predict when or where. So by offering naloxone on our campus, we're taking a step towards student safety and emergency care of our students. Many of our staff, our administrators, safety officers, and nurses have been trained in the use of naloxone. However, naloxone is available for public use as well. You can go to the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition to their webpage, and they can answer questions with regard to accessing naloxone as a private citizen in the community. Some of the other services that are provided on our campus are student assistance specialists and drug use or abuse counselors. These counselors are provided by the Center for Human Services. They're accessible to our students. It's a wonderful service. So if a student is found to be in possession of narcotics or other illicit drugs, we do refer them to the drug use abuse counselors so they can get some counseling in anti-drug therapy. We also have therapists, which include counselors on our campuses, and we have student engagement strategies. Many of our student engagement strategies include the use of social media as guided by our own student representative from the school board who helps to design our messages so they are student forward. We also use, in addition to social media platforms, we also use the school message system, Parent Square, as well as using Schoology, which is the learning management platform that we use on our campuses so that we can assist our students with up-to-date information. All of these strategies together are instrumental in helping to continue to reduce the number of deaths in our community, as was evidenced on the graph earlier by Officer Lemus. Next slide, please. So I want to reference the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Awareness Summit. This is hosted by the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition, and coincidentally, it's coming up this Thursday on December 1st. It's from 8:30 to 4:30. You can reach the summit information by going to stanrx.net. There you can register for the summit. This will be an amazing summit with many guest speakers, solutions to the problem, recommendations, how to prevent, and more information beyond that. I highly encourage you that if you are interested, or if you have a family member or a friend who is a user of fentanyl or other illegal drugs, this may be the perfect place to go to learn how you can best support that person. Next slide. I can't thank Officer Lemus enough for being here this evening, so thank you, Officer Lemus. If there are questions, this is the end of our actual presentation, but I really do appreciate the opportunity, and Officer Lemus, your experience and your expertise in drugs and gang activity is really an eye-opener to let us know exactly how this is affecting our community, as well as what the presence is on our campuses. So I can't thank you enough for being here. And Ms. Herrera, I will be more than happy to turn this meeting back over to you.
Thank you both. We greatly appreciate all the information you gave to our families. And before we move on to the Q&A sessions for tonight's presentations, we'd like to share important Modesto City Schools resources. Also, the last slide of this presentation will contain our department contact information for further parent assistance. For our class schedules and much more, you can go to Modesto City Schools website and click on the parent tabs and then click on the Tech Help Center. These sites provide how-to videos and trainings for our most used applications, and there is also much more to explore for parent and student help and support. Once you click on the Tech Help Centers, if you scroll to about the middle of the page, you'll find these parent tools. Here are the how-to guides and how-to videos for PowerSchool, Parent Square, and Schoology. From the Parent Help Center page, you will scroll to the middle of the page, and here you will find the link for the training calendar, and it will take you to our upcoming classes. After clicking the training calendar, you'll find yourself on the calendar page where we've highlighted today's date. Here you can find all scheduled parent classes, and by clicking any of the meetings on the calendar, you'll find the link to join the meeting. Any of the topics you are interested in, and regardless of what school might be hosting the event, all of Modesto City Schools families are welcome to attend. At this time, we'll now take a few questions for the presenters, and remember that you can type in any question into the chat or click on the raised hand icon to have your turn to ask the question. So go
Ms.
ahead.
Herrera?
It's Patty. Go ahead, Mr. Nipper.
Oh, sorry, Patty. I do see some questions in the chat that'll be real easy for me to address. So can I go ahead and do that?
I have them on a list, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. That way everybody can see them, everybody can hear them, and then you can ask them. So I'll go ahead and ask Yesenia and Alexia. So one of their questions was already answered, so I'll ask the last of their question. It was in regards to the Narcan. So you answered that question in your presentation that all of Modesto City Schools has the Narcan, but the end of the question was, what quantity of precautions like Narcan are carried on campus?
So we don't speak specifically about quantity, we speak about value. So we do have the emergency medications on our campus. And the reason we don't speak of quantity is because if we stated a quantity today, but we used it today, our quantity would be different for tomorrow. So we do have the medication on our campuses so that we can support our students' safety, and then we do have a resource so that we can replace it once it is used. But there is adequate supply in our community so that we can best protect our students. I also noticed that there was a question about how much is being confiscated. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go down the questions.
sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So
Oh,
here's
just
the
a
next
little,
question.
just a little on the Narcan as well. We, as all the officers out in the field, carry it for themselves and for the community members that may be in an emergency situation. Sometimes we're closer to a call for service regarding an overdose than the fire department is. And so we will readily have it available on our person so that we can use it if we have to. And then also the fire department carries enough quantities to assist our community members if a situation may arise.
Thank you both. So the next question is from Yesenia. She says, at what frequency are we seeing these drugs, specifically fentanyl and opioids, being confiscated in our Modesto City schools at all grade levels?
So there's not a true frequency. I can tell you that since October 1st, we've had a suspected 3 persons that have overdosed from fentanyl, but we can't necessarily speak that it was specifically a fentanyl overdose. So, but we did have 3 persons transported to the hospital since October 1st relating to potential drug overdoses. When it comes to confiscation, we are not testing the medications or drugs that we may find because of the health hazard and risk to ourselves that Officer Lemus referred to also for his officers. So we often do not test the drugs, but we may confiscate the drugs and notify parents with regard to the medication or drugs.
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. The next question is from Veronica. So comparing the sizes of fentanyl pills, how many grams or quantity of force is there to affect our youth? For example, 15-year-olds. Would even a lick to one of these pills kill a young person?
So I'll answer some of it and then Tom could probably address it more. But the problem with these clandestine type of pills is that they're not made by scientists or doctors or lab workers. They're made by individuals who are, sometimes texted a recipe, if you will, to make it. And so the quantities can be different on every batch of pills that are made. Typically, in my experiences here in the city of Modesto, because this is the only place I've worked at, the trend is that they will make the pill enough to hook, for lack of better terms, a user, and then sometimes they have batches of pills that are made that are too potent, and even half a pill could kill somebody. So there's not an exact measurement that they use because number one, they don't care, and it's an illegal substance made by people who are not physicists and lab workers, if you will.
Thank you. We do have some raised hands, so I'm going to go ahead and go with the raised hand. Becky, if you're with us, please go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question. Becky, you have the platform to go ahead and ask your question. Please unmute your mic. Okay, we'll go on to Yesenia. Yesenia, if you're with us, please go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Sorry, I have all my kids here while I'm on here, so you might hear them in the background. I did get a lot of my questions asked earlier. However, being someone with somewhat of a field, like a background in medical, my concerns is with emergency administration of Narcan. Is it dosed out per size of an individual, as is, any other medication? You have a 6-year-old child who's going to be drastically different in size and weight to an 8th grader who's 12 or 13 years old and can take in more medication. I know that you said that you cannot overdose on Narcan earlier in your presentation, but is there a possibility that it could pose some additional harm if the wrong dose is administered?
So That's a really good question, and I'm trying to get back to the slide that actually had it. So these are metered, what's called a metered dose, and so it's a controlled dose of Narcan. And if I get to the slide, I'm doing it on a side screen here, so bear with me for a second, okay?
Sure.
So I believe I don't recall what the dose is, okay? And I can't read the box, so I apologize. I think it's 4 milligram dose. And no, it's not metered. This is a nasal. We are using a nasal spray for the medication within the school district. That's what's being distributed through the Opioid Safety Coalition, and what's also being distributed from the California Department of Public Health, which is also where we get our supply from. So there are other methods for administration, but in our community, it's the nasal spray. And 4 milligrams is 4 milligrams. And what we find out is that there is the fentanyl in our community is often requiring 2 to 3 doses of the Narcan to help to reverse, or at least get to a point of stable reversal. But the Narcan is short-lived and only effective on the opiate. So it only interferes with the opiate uptake in the body, which is why you don't have the potential for the overdose on the Narcan, and why it's effective at multiple dose ranges for multiple people. I am not aware of a safety concern giving 4 milligrams to any person, and it may have a better effect on the younger person than it does on the older person because of the quantity of medication that was taken.
If I may ask one last thing before we go on to the next person, I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time this evening, but do we know, even if, as a broad statistic or an educated guess, the effectiveness of administering Narcan on a campus, seeing the early signs of a potential overdose? Is it to where you guys can say, this is showing that 3 out of 4 kids have a positive outcome, or it's a 50-50 shot that your kid's going to survive, just so that as parents, we have a realistic outlook on what we're facing in the current situation that is, drugs being available at school.
Sure. So the Los Angeles County Unified School District has been on an Narcan kick for quite a while now, and they're actually one of the state leaders as far as advocacy for Narcan or naloxone on the school campuses. So a lot of the research is being done in Southern California, and it's finally coming up to Northern California. San Francisco Unified School District also is a more regional proponent of having the naloxone on campus. There are too many factors that have to be considered when you talk about the success rate of naloxone. Number one, are there any other medications or drugs that were being used at the time in addition to the opiate? But the other thing is how much of the opiate, and as Officer Lemus referred, it's too difficult to tell what the potency is of a particular pill that a person has ingested. So I equate that to how much oregano do you put in pizza or lasagna, and sometimes you might get more spice in one corner than another. And that's pretty much how fentanyl, when it's being created, it's just not being created equally in these clandestine labs. So you don't know the quantity and you don't know the outcome. And so because of that, we are seeing that some people need more naloxone and some people don't require as much naloxone. When you start considering all of those, there are no statistical numbers that I am aware of right now that say that 3 out of 5 recover because of the long-term effect of the opiate in the body and how long a person may have been using the opiates or other drugs in addition to the opiate that may be causing some issues within their person. So there's too many components right there. But Los Angeles Unified School District, San Francisco Unified School District are having real, unfortunately needed, but positive outcomes as far as recovery, as far as using the naloxone on the campus and buying time to get EMS and proper medical attention to the person.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate that information and you guys taking my questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll go to the next person. Latasha, if you are still on, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. It's Letitia.
I'm sorry, Letitia, go ahead.
So it's okay. So my question is a little different because I appreciate these parent virtual meetings and forums, but some of us parents are knowledgeable and some of us aren't, and then some parents don't even come. But my question is, what are you guys doing at the school besides the counseling and things like that? Do you guys hold assemblies like to teach kids about different drugs and how it looks like candy and just things like that? When I was growing up, we had assemblies like that. And that just was my question because myself, we try and teach my daughter as much as we can and about different things that's, in this world. Unfortunately, she's only 8 and she has to know these things. I just want to know what the schools are doing, like as far as teaching the children, through assemblies or, just besides not just having counseling or, how are you guys getting it through to some of the students who aren't able to get this knowledge and understanding from home?
That's a good question, and thanks for asking that. So in the ninth grade, our students are required to have a health class, and part of that health class does talk about illegal drug use. There's also a regional Red Ribbon Week, which is a drug awareness advocacy program, and that's celebrated on all of our school campuses. So it's not about just smoking or marijuana, but it is an all-inclusive drug education program, and that does come with individualized classroom opportunities to have conversations about drugs with grade-specific pamphlets or informations being shared. Also in the seventh grade, there is also a health class that also addresses some of these issues. But although this is not a new issue as far as having drugs in our community, the presence of fentanyl and the severity is a relatively young content or a new content area for us. So we're working real closely with the Stanislaus County's Opioid Safety Coalition and the California Department of Public Health and the CDC as we roll out informational topics for this. We don't currently have assemblies necessarily, but we do small group activities within the classroom so that we can answer the questions. And we often invite law enforcement on our campuses where they have good examples of what different drugs might look like in our community. And those are just on as request opportunities. So we are doing some presence on our campuses and in our classrooms to help educate our students about the risks involved with the drugs and what to look out for.
Right. And my daughter, so she's in 3rd grade. Do you guys have where like, okay, remember the fire dog that come? Yeah, like where it's age appropriate where, cuz I mean my daughter she's pretty smart and sometimes it's like, "Oh, oh my God." But where they can come into the classroom and kind of just have some type of lecture and kind of get the kids. I know some parents may not agree. Maybe they feel their children is too young, but I mean, given what we have faced in this world, this community, some things now is like you have to put it out there, and what about the younger children besides just the 7th or 8th graders? Is there something for them?
Yeah, so we are working on an enhanced education process for the elementaries as well. But right now it's handled in the teaching in the classroom by the teachers, primarily during Red Ribbon Week. We do invite guest speakers to come on our campuses frequently. Of course, COVID did interrupt with that for quite a while, but we are getting back to that norm of having guest speakers on our campuses.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here this evening.
Okay, we have a question from Serena. She wants to know if this can easily be dissolved in a beverage without someone knowing.
Officer Lemus?
Based only on my experience, I have not personally investigated cases that had this type of use, but I guess in theory it could be used that way. No different than the roofies that we heard about back in our days. It could potentially be a problem, obviously, like in a public bar setting or something like that, or a nightclub. Not very common that I've heard of in this area. I've also worked on some task forces that included the sheriff's office, the Turlock Police Department, and all the regional agencies in our county, and I have never heard of a case specifically of that nature. But I in theory, I suppose it could happen.
Thank you. Our next question is from Sarah. She wants to know, can the general public obtain Narcan?
Yeah, thank you. So that's you can contact the Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition. Contact them through the website stanrx.net, and those questions can be answered there, as well as how do I get Narcan for me as a person. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah also had a second question. She said, are opioids used in vape pens? There's so many vape pens on campuses.
I have some experience, Officer Lemus. I'm gonna let you answer that first, and then I'll see how I can supplement you.
Okay. I have not seen it or had cases that are investigated that it was used that way. I know that it is trending in the East Coast, and so like everything else, different trends on the internet or things that go viral or different methods of ingestion start to come to us on the West Coast or in the Central Valley. I have not investigated or heard of any investigation involving Modesto police officers knowing that it was consumed or ingested in the vape pen fashion.
My experience is along lines with Officer Lemus, with the exception that I did participate in a meeting with CDPH and LA Unified School District 2 weeks ago, in which they were aware of fentanyl being put into vape pens. It's not an easy task, but they were aware of it on their campus and had 2 instances where it had happened.
Interesting. Thank you for those answers. Okay, Yesenia had a question. I think you sort of answered it, but I'll go ahead and read it. There's 3 pieces here. It says, is Narcan effective in fentanyl overdose? Are the doses measured out for a child's size to prevent further harm or damage? So, Mr. Nipper, I think you answered that. You might want to reiterate.
Yeah, she did ask that when she was online, and so it's a metered dose. I forget what the first question was. It's only effective against opioids.
Yes, and the measured, I think you said it was 4 ounces or 4 milliliters.
It's a 4 milligram.
4 milligram. Okay,
is what I believe is the dose. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go on to Clarissa's question. What are some of the early warning signs that one of your children might have started experimenting with drugs?
Officer Lemus, do you have any input on that before I join in?
Can you please repeat the question?
What are some of the early warning signs that one of your children might have started experimenting with drugs?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the I guess the initial behaviors that you're going to notice would be them having like a higher anxiety level. They're nervous about things that they weren't nervous about. They're starting to detach themselves from the rest of the family element, like they're spending more time in the room alone. You notice that they're falling asleep a lot during the day because they're not getting sleep at night. And it can be because they're using tobacco, right? Different vape pens, or it's not just specifically based on fentanyl or opioids. Those are some of the red flags that you're just going to notice from any type of substance abuse. So you're going to notice those small changes in behavior, things where or actions or behaviors where they don't want to engage in group settings anymore, and they used to do that. So you as a parent know your child more than the rest of us, and so you're going to notice those subtle changes. Some of the obvious signs would be, red, watery eyes, droopy, slurred speech, being lethargic, being clammy, being sweaty. Those are very obvious that you're going to notice. But those other subtle changes in behavior and actions are going to be a red flag that you probably need to look into.
And changes in their friend group, decreasing their interest in activities that they used to enjoy, the whole withdrawal, social withdrawal, and changing, not wanting you to know who their friends are, being more protective over what their technology is and what their messaging is and such like that are also some of the telltale signs that something's changing socially, and it very well could be drugs.
Thank you. Our next question is from AB. If fentanyl is found on a student, is there a warning sent out to all parents to be on the lookout?
No, we don't currently do that. We work directly with law enforcement and with the Modesto Police and Stanislaus County Sheriff's Office, depending on which school you're at. But we do work directly with them. And if that is a concern, we do turn it directly over to law enforcement for their processing. And then we work with them as far as what notification may be.
And just a little bit more to add on that, if we were involved in an investigation and during the investigation we find out that other students or other people that maybe that are not even students at any of the schools were involved in it, whether they received or bought or purchased or furnished or anything like that, we're obviously going to take that direction in the investigation and make the proper notifications of whether they be, concerns or medical considerations. But we would definitely, that's why it's an investigation, because we're trying to figure out the most information we can to make the proper notifications to whoever may be affected.
But we
Thank
don't
you.
do a school-wide notification.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from Alexia Guzman. Have there been any opioids found on school campuses this year?
So we don't test all of our drugs, and we do rely, if there was an overdose or some medication issue, we do rely on parents to get back to us with information about what the hospital might have been. So I can't speak specifically to a particular opioid overdose, but I can tell you that we have had 3 students since October 1st that have been transported to hospitals based on a suspicion of overdose of drugs.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll take the raised hand. SP, if you're still with us, please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, and the first is, one of the things in the presentation was about the emojis and, doing our part as parents to look at social media. When we actually are doing that and we find that during the school session, somebody is advertising for the sale of drugs, should we report that directly to the school administration or should we call 911?
That's a good question. I think that obviously there's a lot of derivatives to a discovery of that magnitude. But let's say that you're at home when you discover, or maybe over the weekend you discover messages like this. It's definitely something that we need to know about as the police department, so that we can again do a thorough investigation and make the notifications that we need to. If it's something that you found that indicate that things are happening at the school, I would definitely strongly advise you that the police department still needs to know about it, but also you would want to inform the school administration about your findings.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll be happy to help at the school site as well. So if you find out that information and you're concerned, we would be more than happy to support you as a parent and support the school and the safety of our students by pulling that student out of class with your presence and supporting you by perhaps checking their phone, doing some investigating, asking questions. And we have a lot of ways to support on the campus if you were to find that information. But notifying law enforcement as well as the school site if it was happening during school hours, that would be a great asset for us. So thank you.
Okay, and then my last question is, what frequency does the district use drug sniffing dogs or, any type of device that helps to detect the presence of drugs during the school day?
So we do have a contract with an agency to provide that service, but that service is not done on a scheduled process. So we're not able to discuss those things, but we do have that service and we do use that service on our campuses. But it's not something that we regulate. It's just something that we work with that agency for. So it's intentionally a vague answer, but the dogs do exist on our campuses.
Okay.
Okay, we have Maria and Bill. Go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having this session. It's very informative, and sadly, it is overwhelming the school systems. We've experienced it. My question is there police officers or young officers that can act as students and get involved with the teens at the schools so that you basically get offered to purchase or sell, because we know that that is overwhelming in the school system. So if there isn't an overdose, all of those are being, you know, not being noticed or seen or recognized.
So I can tell you that we do have a narcotics enforcement team here at the Modesto Police Department. That entire unit is an undercover assignment. They have had investigations in the past that included undercover buys, what we call rollbacks or buybacks, that involved students at schools. Obviously, any ongoing or future investigations I wouldn't be able to discuss, but it is a narcotics enforcement team for the city of Modesto. They do a lot of undercover operations, and so they're actively and proactively trying to find, excuse me, dealers who sell these types of narcotics out to our community, and it's a big priority for the department and obviously the city.
Thank you. Do you think that maybe more will be, funds will be allocated in this area more so? Because it is a huge problem, and it sadly, unfortunately, it's our young people that are being affected by this.
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you is that it is a priority. Obviously, funds and budgeting things is above my pay grade. I wouldn't be able to tell you, what the future plans are for the chief of police and the mayor and things like that. What I can tell you is that it is a serious problem. We do take a very proactive enforcement measures for it, and we combat it as much as we can. But like anything else, more funds would definitely help, absolutely. But we do. It's not something that we just kind of let and stand idle. We actively take an approach to where we're gonna open these investigations and try to find who is selling, what they're doing, where they're getting it from, how is it coming into our community, and things like that. I have personally investigated rings of different gangs in Modesto that sell these types of narcotics, and I can tell you it's not something that we take lightly. We take a proactive approach.
Thank you. How can we, the parents, help our kids?
Well, like all things, and perhaps Tom may have other suggestions, but like all things with relating to crime in the police department, the community is our eyes, and they are the people who are going to see things before we do. And so we have Crime Stoppers that you can Google online. You can download an application for it. You can remain anonymous and provide information. But a lot of the issues and problems and quality of life issues are going to come from the community itself, and they're going to know it before we do, because there's not enough of us to be in every neighborhood at every school. And so we heavily rely on the reports that we get from our community. And so like anything else, the more information you have, the better for us to open an investigation on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Officer Salinas, we have a question for you from Veronica. Her question is, have you ever found any students selling drugs at any school campus?
In an 18-year career, sometimes things start to mesh and blend in my memory. I don't specifically remember having like a major incident that stemmed from the school campus, but I did make notifications to other students and parents that went to the same school, because there was a potential for them being exposed to other types of drugs, not specifically fentanyl or opioids. But in recent history, I don't think we've had anything major that we haven't put out on our social media as a public information statement. But I've personally have dealt with some of the basic stuff, like, and it's sad to say now that we use the word common, but like marijuana, possession of marijuana and things like that. I have investigated that throughout my career. Again, nothing major in recent history.
Okay, Letitia, do you have a question? Go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, hi again, you guys. It wasn't really a question. What I wanted to share with the parents, some of them may know already, but there's an app called Family Link. it's an app where you're able to monitor your children's time on the phone, block certain apps like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, Snapchat. You can block the use, you can unlock it, you can give them bonus time, things like that, where it helps kind of just monitor their use, where you're kind of seeing what your child is doing and the activities on the phone. It even has like an GPS, and I just thought I would share that. It kind of tells me when my daughter leaves home, where she is, when she arrives home, things like that. So I just thought it was kind of something I can share with the parents, since we're on this, whole thing about the social media where they're sharing all this stuff, where you can probably try and just give you a little more insight on what your child is doing. You can turn their phone off, you can make it ring. I mean, just it's so many different things, but it's called Family Link, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Letitia.
You're
We
welcome.
have one more question from Jennifer, and this will be our last question. It is from Jennifer. It says, is the Narcan nasal spray as effective as intramuscular injection?
That's a really good medical question. The answer is yes. So naloxone is one of those drugs that can be given multiple ways. And so because of the thin membranes in the nose, the naloxone is absorbed very quickly into the bloodstream, and it does react very quickly. So it's very similar in effect and speed as it is for the injection or any other way. And I'm glad she asked about Narcan. I just want to remind people that if they do sign up and go to the Opioid Safety Awareness Summit on Thursday, December 1st, that attending that they do have naloxone to give to the community at that summit. So if you are interested in learning more about naloxone, fentanyl in our community, and ways to help prevent issues, then I encourage you to attend the Opioid Safety Awareness Summit on Thursday. It's from 8:30 to 4:30. The link is in the chat, but Narcan will be given out, distributed there to those who want it, courtesy of Stanislaus County Opioid Safety Coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Nipper. We also want to let you know that all the links are in the chat. We've also put your the Modesto Police Department Crime Stoppers information on there. We have your information on there, Mr. Nipper, as well. And like we said, the links. So, Mr. Nipper, is there anything else, or Mr. Lemus, you'd like to add before we close the
I
presentation?
just want to address Amy's question in the chat about consequences of drugs. Our conduct code treats students individually, and so there's too many components that are there. But we do take drugs on our campuses seriously. We are a no-nonsense school district, and so there are federal laws and state laws that protect students on our campus from harm that includes firearms and illegal drugs. So we do take it very seriously, and we certainly would get help for somebody if they were with drugs, but at the same time, we're going to do everything we can to protect the other students on the campus. So I just can't get into the specifics because it would be unique per the person. So.
And the only thing I wanted to mention is thank all the parents who took the time to be here with us today. I think that's one of the major reasons why that graph shows a decline in overdoses throughout our community, because parents like you are involved and are educated, and prevention is key to this problem.
Absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that, Officer Lemus. I really appreciate the opportunity for the PEO team to make this opportunity for us to present. Officer Lemus, I know this was time out of your day for a really important topic, but I really appreciate your presence. I know I looked at the people. We had over 65 participants, and that tells me that our community is really concerned about our students, what's going on in our community, and how can we help make a difference. And all I want to say is thank you, just like Officer Lemus did. This has been a really great evening, a lot of great questions, and I couldn't have asked for a better way to spend my night than just to help educate our community. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you guys both very much. Our last slide shows our department contact information along with the bit.ly image that will take you directly to our page. Please feel free to contact us at any time for more parent-related information. Also, don't forget to fill out this survey to give us feedback and share with us your recommendations for future parent classes and presentation topics. The survey link will be posted in the chat. Once again, we want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.